Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us tonight here at the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center. We are very pleased to welcome Katherine Gass Stowe, co-curator of the Felt Experience. Tonight's admission is pay as you wish. If you would like to make a donation for tonight's event, you can see Vanessa over at the front desk or make a donation in the donation box at the foyer. Just to speak a little bit about Katie, she's the founder and chief curator at James Company Contemporary Arts Project. She's also one of the regional curators for Bank of America. She's also held positions at the Whitney Museum and the Aldrich Contemporary Art Museum, and she received her MFA from NYU. One of the most important things about Katie, to us here at BMAC, is that she's a long-standing curator with us, and we really love having her shows in our museum. This is her 4th exhibition with the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center, and she will be having her 5th next year. It's a solo exhibition of Aurora Robson, and it starts on June 24th, 2023, and we are looking forward to it. If you would all join me in welcoming Katherine Gass Stowe.
Thank you, Mina. That was really nice. So I'd like to start by thanking you guys for braving the weather and coming out. I really appreciate it. And also thanking Danny Lichtenfeld, who is the director of the Brattleboro Museum and Art Center. He's on his way back from Europe, summer vacation with his son. The amazing staff at the museum who helped mount these works, and especially my co-curator taking pictures over there, Sarah Freeman, who is the director of exhibitions here at Brattleboro Museum. And Sarah is a dream collaborator. Not only was this it was such a fun exhibition to put together, and the artists were all really wonderful. Sarah and I had a meeting of the minds around almost every detail. It was just a really lovely, harmonious experience, and all the way around. All the artists are incredible. So I just wanted to thank Sarah, who is going to be chiming in and filling in the holes where I leave out critical information about the artists. So, well, we have some felters here, so I'll also be relying on you to help set me straight and keep me honest where I'm going off the rails. But just to begin a little bit, some fun facts about wool from the International Wool Textile Organization. So wool, humans have been washing, weaving, and wearing wool since 10,000 BC. There's more than 1,000 sheep breeds in the world, and wool currently accounts for 1.1% of the world's global fiber market. And it's also this incredibly sustainable material that can, sheep regrow their wool every year. It can decompose under certain conditions. It also can last forever under normal conditions. And a really fun fact, a wool fiber can bend 20,000 times without breaking and has the power to recover. So it's a living thing, which is really remarkable to me. And this is the first time I've ever worked with artists who felt, so I had to learn a lot about it. I had no idea I've just done some, I've learned from the artists, I've watched some videos, but I had no idea of the skill level, actually, of these artists. I'm more amazed after learning more about felting. So very quickly, for people who don't know, felting is the process of agitating wool fibers, wool typically coming from sheep. You can make felt from rabbit hair and beaver hair, but it's typically sheep's wool that one would use. And there are 2 types. After the wool is shorn, is that how you say it, from the sheep, then there's a carding process where you're sort of cleaning out the fibers, and then it's formed into bats or roving. And bats are sort of flat, large bunches of wool, and they can be dyed. So roving is more, it's been sort of put into this kind of shape, and it's often twisted like this. But they're just basically two forms that felters work with predominantly. And there are two types of felting, needle felting and wet felting. Needle felting uses needles with tiny barbs at the end that are, you repeatedly sort of jab at the wool to agitate and create, the wool fibers will kind of intermesh. Wet felting is more complicated. It's taking different pieces of felt, laying out a design, and then putting a mesh over that, spraying it with hot soapy water, using your hands to agitate the wool while keeping the pattern in place, then rolling and unrolling, rolling again. It's actually an incredibly physical process. So that's everything I know about felting. And of course, artists throughout time have used felt. There hasn't been, felting has not had its day in the art world yet. And I'm predicting, as Sarah is, that it's going to come in much more, we're going to see it much more pervasively at art fairs and in museums, like ceramics. Like 10 years ago, ceramics started to become very popular in contemporary art, especially in the commercial market. And we really feel that's going to happen with felting. So some contemporary artists who have used felt, Joseph Beuys, of course, his felt suits. Robert Morris used industrial felt, which is another kind I neglected to mention that can be cut and put into forms. And Sheila Hicks, another wonderful American fiber artist, whose quote I really love. She said, "I think that it's important, the wanting, the desire to hold it in your hands, to befriend it, to see if it bites." So with that, we're going to talk about our first artist, Ruth Jeyaveeran, who has 3 beautiful pieces in this exhibition. Ruth is a Brooklyn-based artist and designer and educator. She's shown in galleries all around New York. She's also an assistant professor at the Fashion Institute of Technology at FIT. And Ruth predominantly uses, she says 90% of her work is done by wet felting. She's very interested in collaborating with the medium. She basically wants it to inform her, to inform the shapes. She's interested in things that are evocative of other things, but they're not representing specific objects. She says, I examine the inherent connections between our bodies, our communities, and nature as a way to confront feelings of otherness, alienation, and dissociation. So a big part of what she does as well is the repetitive motion of making, she says, is very important to her work and how she thinks about it. This piece on the wall here is titled What Came Before. It's, this piece sort of expands and contracts according to the space that it's in. She began it in 2019, and I think this is its last iteration, right, Sarah? She said she's sort of done with it. But connecting, it's a community of these objects that she's connected with thread. This very sort of beautiful, tenuous connection of these objects that could be ritualistic or spiritual or functional in some way. And the wet felting allows for this beautiful, very painterly transition of colors. She was using basically black and white and creating a gray here, with her felt, but she is, you know, she does introduce colors into her other work. Also, if you guys have questions as we go along, please jump in. I love a conversation, a back and forth conversation. Yes?
I just don't really understand what she's trying to accomplish here. Can you just talk a little bit more about that?
Sure. Well, I'm not sure that she's meant to accomplish something, sort of a start and a finish, by the very nature of the fact that this piece has taken 4 years. It sort of she kept creating objects to connect to one another, but she's thinking about how objects are connected to one another, how they may refer to nature, how they might refer to an object that you would use, a utilitarian object, and then what that conversation could be between and among the different objects. That's why she sort of threaded them together. So she uses, there's a term she used, I actually had to look it up, reverse taxonomy, which I got a lot of crazy scientific stuff. I was like, I don't know what that means. But essentially, it's creating first and finding meaning second, is how I'm sort of translating that. I don't know if that answers your question, but I think the vagueness of what she's doing, she talks a lot about collaborating with the wool. So it's telling her how it wants to be shaped as well. And there is a beautiful mystery in that. The traditional kind of ancient techniques of felting have been the same for thousands of years. So in some ways, she's also connecting herself to this lineage of making, just by doing it. And she says it's very calming in this age of anxiety that we're living in, with lots of, you know, things to worry about in different ways. It's very grounding to be part of this ancient process that, you know, of felting. And this piece here, called Greening, she said started off as a monochromatic black and white piece, and the tubes were evocative of organ pipes, bones, trees, even a mud dauber's nest. And she said she was planning to repeat the element, but as she kept working, she was thinking about regrowth and regeneration and things coming back to life. And then green found its way into the work. And she says her work often starts out with one idea and then ends up in a completely different place, as often is the case with art. This is work by Liam Lee. Liam is a New York-based artist and designer, and he's worked in architecture, and he's also worked with a set designer named Mary Howard. And he's worked with clients like Dior, Versace, and Prada, and publications like Vogue and Vanity Fair. So Liam is coming into this field from a very different vantage point. So he's said he's interested in architecture and the human body, and also how he can actually condense space and create these microcosm environments, if you will, that sort of encapsulate the macro and the micro of things. He said during the pandemic he was thinking a lot about our domestic lives. You know, we were shut in the houses and in our homes, and how objects in our homes can start to be imbued with our spirits in a way, and our anxieties in a way. And he also started thinking about the fragility of the human form, permeability, and, you know, things that could harm us, thinking that we're safe and you know, we're not, if you remember the whole foamite situation where we were worried about surfaces, and so he started making things that related to his thoughts about that. He was looking at nature and also thinking about exterior worlds and interior worlds and how he could fuse them and merge them. His chairs are really beautiful. We put mirrors here so you can actually look underneath and see how he signs his work. But these are needle felted. And for this chair, he was looking at, I don't think I wrote it down, but this incredible flower that looks like a brain. Have you? I don't know the term, but so he was referencing nature and fantasy, and I believe he needle felted around an oak base. These are extremely heavy and just really beautiful and sort of beefy. And then with his tapestries, he really saw these as gardens in a way. He wanted to explore this idea, how gardens are kind of controlled nature. We try to control chaos through garden design. So he was thinking about that when he was making these. And the techniques here, again, this is all needle felting. And you can't, you know, you're not using a machine. It's a human hand and a needle. So the time invested is just remarkable to me, but also the repetitive motion, the almost mantra-like physical motion, if you will. But it's also really fun to see how he signs his work. There's a craftsmanship that's just extraordinary, and he gets these beautiful saturated colors. He's represented by Patrick Parrish Gallery in Manhattan and has a bunch of shows actually now. So if you go to his website, you can see what he's up to. I don't know if you have any questions about Liam's work.
Do you know if he dyes the background?
If he dyes the wool himself, I don't know. That's an excellent question. I want to say yes. But I'm not sure. I'll ask him. Do you know, Sarah?
I don't know, and I was just talking to somebody here who was kind of blown away by the needle felting involved in this, and just the amount of labor involved in this process.
And there are also these beautiful, you know, he's thinking about domestic objects, so and I also think about the history of tapestries, like Aubusson tapestries, wool tapestries that Picasso did and some of the surrealists did, and I love that he's bringing up this kind of art form. When we were hanging these, they're just stitched to this dowel on the back, and it's super simple, and there are two little holes on each end of the dowel, and it's sort of a stark contrast to these enormously heavy chairs. But they just went up, and we sort of fluffed the top up. You know, they're so beautifully designed, and they're also so easy. It really belies all of the work that goes into them, I think. So
I think it looks like something you see under a microscope.
exactly. It's that kind of macro and micro. I mean, during the pandemic, we were all looking at these awful things with red points coming out of them, and, you know, and I was thinking about a lot of different things and looking at art, and I would start to see these kind of microbe forms in art that I never noticed before. So it does, you know, it's permeated our subconscious. And I do think some of that is at play here, you know, but it's much more playful, and then he's also referencing other organic forms and gardens. But I love the way that he's using this neon too, just this beautiful ribbon. And that's something that all of the artists do, whether they're wet felting or needle felting. There is another embellishment, some kind of stitching or beading that happens. So, yeah.
Katie,
Yes.
can you talk about, do you know why Liam signs his artwork like this? I noticed we can't see any type of signature on her work, but his is very present in these little cellular forms.
Such a great, I can only guess, this is not, you know, what he has told me, but I just feel like he's worked at an architecture firm and with set design and in magazines, and there's something very beautiful about signing, you know, his own signature and kind of authoring his works. I have a hunch that has something to do with it, and I'm probably not articulating that well, but I'm delighted by the way he signs his works. It's just, it's really beautiful. And there is this kind of, I don't know, there's a bit of a throwback feeling to, you know, again, those Aubusson wool tapestries, the artists would sign their name in, you know, you have to see, everybody come around and just take a look at the mirror and look down and see how he's signed.
This feels really intimate, like somehow you're.
Yeah.
This is very organic and like a body.
Yes. And I know you want to touch it, and you can't. I'm sorry. But you can touch the next ones. You can, I know, I have to like hold myself back. But I mean, I don't even know, I'm sure you, as a felter, you would understand how he did that. I don't know how.
You have to get a really thin, like a roving, but pencil thin, and then you just start. Needling
Oh,
it.
and you needle it in.
Yes, yes. And
Amazing.
the same with his signature, although it's not, there's not a contrast, but he just keeps needling it in the same place.
Oh, so
to
it's.
create it, to indent.
Ah, fabulous. So Stephanie Metz actually just gave a talk this week. She came from California. She lives in San Jose with her husband and her 2 children. And she has a studio at, I'm sorry. Oh, Almeida Artworks. She has a studio in downtown San Jose. And her talk was fascinating. So she has been felting and needle felting for quite a while. She was very interested in skulls and human forms, and also kind of honing her craft. And then she discovered that she actually did a whole series of teddy bear skulls. And then she started morphing those skulls into more, she started taking out kind of the functional aspects of these animal forms and making them more, they almost looked sci-fi in a way, almost like an ecology experiment. And then she, I'm sort of jumping because her process is really fascinating, but to cut to the chase, people wanted to touch them all the time. And she said, well, I'm the artist, I'm here. If your hands are clean, go ahead and touch it, you know? And then she was commissioned actually for a museum it was also in California, the Dissasset Museum in Santa Clara, California. She got a huge commission for a solo exhibition. And she started to look into some of these ideas about these wonderful biomorphic / animal shapes, and was thinking about touch and play. And that's how these, the In Touch series started, in fact. And during this time also, the political environment has been we've been in a difficult political environment for the last X amount of years, and there was a tremendous amount of division in her family, which really saddened her. And she was trying to figure out how she could bridge the gap. She's like, I'm not a politician, I'm not a leader, I make weird felt things. How do I reach across? And this is how she decided to reach across. She said that when people started touching her work, they created a community. And in order to create these works, she also had to bring in people to her studio for help because she couldn't do it all herself. These are molded shapes that then have industrial felt over them, and then she needle felts on top of that. So they're really labor intense and took a long time. And she had a bunch of volunteers from all different parts who came in, and now she has this community of people who come and help her with her work, but also this idea of a touchable a huggable sculpture for her began with a political quest and sort of ended with bringing community together. So if you'd like to come up and touch them, you're welcome to. You just have to clean your hands with this stuff. Yep, and just be gentle. It's really fascinating, actually. She has designed these. She's an engineer as much as anything. And she's designed these to have release. You can do a full body thing. You can go, yeah, nice. They have a release if a child comes up and jumps on them. There's a release here as well. So, there's a molded structure. Some of it's styrofoam. She actually started by carving styrofoam in her earlier days. So but she also makes, it's important to her to use sustainable materials, so she goes and uses recycled things and then.
Different materials inside.
Yes, exactly. And we ship these from California. Thanks to one of my staff members, Corey Van Goulden, found a great shipper, and we got them here safely and in one piece.
Even the way they're hung from the
I love that.
Yes, so she's needle felted. She did. She had an animation, like a moving animation with drawings of these detailed instructions for how to hang. She figured out how to, the weight, the height. It was really remarkable. And she does love to make it look like they're just, they've grown here.
Yeah, they look like, science fiction pods, Invasion of the Body.
Yes. Oh, and that's such a good point. Actually, she said people liken them to cocoons.
Yeah.
And she said it's fitting because it speaks of the potential for change and growth. Like something in a cocoon usually comes out of the cocoon in a new shape.
What would have happened if you didn't have this lovely, big hanger?
So it's a great question. She actually, for the exhibition that commissioned these, there are many more of these, by the way. She curated this. We figured out the number. We selected the ones that we felt would work the best in the space. And then she completely designed how she wanted. And during the day when the sun comes through, it's so beautiful when they're backlit. There's a whole conversation that these have with the space and with the people in the space that sort of changes all the time. And it's extraordinary to see children interact with these, actually. It's beautiful, they light up. So our next artist is Melissa Joseph. Melissa works and lives in Brooklyn, New York as well. She studied at the Pennsylvania Academy of Art Rhode Island School of Design, FIT, and New York University. And she's currently at the Archie Bay Foundation in Montana studying ceramics. And she's wonderful. Melissa, well, all the artists are wonderful. Melissa has an incredible personality. She's very warm and also very interested in community. Her family is from southwestern India, Kerala, and some of her earliest memories are flying back with her father to see his family. And that region in India, it's on the Arabian Sea, and it's very lush, and there's a lot of water, and it's very beautiful. What she remembers from these transatlantic trips is sitting in an airplane looking out a window. And she talked, there's actually a beautiful interview with her on the museum's website called Art Loves Company, that's the blog, but there's a wonderful interview with her I encourage you to look at after. There's also a great time-lapse video of her wet felting, which is amazing. But these are images, and they're pictures of her. As soon as she could get a phone with a camera, she started taking pictures out the window. And then she was thinking a lot about the South Asia. She's from India originally. She's first generation here, but she's thinking a lot about what that view represents to people traveling from their home back to their homeland and back to home. The diaspora, again, this idea of being suspended between two places. And so this series is, actually these two works are going to France after this to another museum show, but we have them till October. But this, so she's wet felted this, and she's used an incredible paper called a mate paper. This is a Mexican paper that's ancient. It's a technique made out of ficus bark, also fig bark, but it's also fibrous. And when I was learning about it, I thought that's really brilliant, actually, to use another kind of fibrous living thing as the support for these airplane windows. This is called Podcast. I believe this is younger her, but she used wet felting with this and inkjet print on Indian Dupioni silk, which is an Indian silk. So she also brings in the colors and the textures and the textiles of India into her work. And Sem, I just want to read you a couple things that she has said about the airplane series, because I think it's really beautiful. She says they're a symbol of resilience. Actually, she learned that the early commercial airplanes tried square windows, but the planes crashed because the corners were weak spots from the pressure outside. So the round shape is, for her, a symbol of resilience. It can stand incredible pressure, which I think is just really interesting. And the ubiquitous view of a global society, of the plane wing or a series of clouds below. And she says, I hope for these to act as an invitation for viewers to come sit next to me and look out. So creating community, again, is very important to her. These are also works by Melissa Joseph, and these are wet felted sort of family album pictures, if you will. These are all family members. And she loves wet felting. She kind of likens, the term she uses is slippage, because there's a lot of unknown surprises that can happen in the process of wet felting, and she says it's like memory. It's, you don't remember anything exactly as it actually happened. So there's something inherent in the medium that mirrors memory for her, which is really, really beautiful. And I love that this is a family album. And again, wool is so visceral and tactile. It's a living thing. And to make images of loved ones out of a living thing, there are layers here that are really incredibly beautiful, and I think extremely poignant as well. This is a self-portrait, and this is her sweater. These are this one's called Baby Baby, and these are two babies lying. I mean, it's almost like a baby's crib, the blanket that you would put in a baby's crib. I have such a hard time not touching that. I can't tell you. It's like, but you can see the way that she's laid down these strips of wool. So it's basically when you're wet felting, you're laying it down just like this. It doesn't move around. It coalesces. In fact, it's like putting a sweater in a washing machine, and when you take it out in the dryer, it's like it's coalesced together. It's interwoven. But some of this are silk threads. I don't see any other medium that she's used other than wool in these, but she is now working with wool and ceramics. She's marrying the two. She showed me pieces with shells. Did she show you those? Oh my gosh, these like beautiful, they weren't conch shells. They were very interesting, unusual shells that were almost like bowls. And she filled them with felt and portraits. I recommend you go onto her website. It's fabulous. So, and our last artist, Marjolein Dallinga. So, Marjolein is Dutch-born. She lives in Quebec, Canada. She has an extraordinary studio called Bloom Felt. She teaches people how to felt. She's clearly a wizard, and she predominantly uses wet felting, but also we'll talk about the gray matter, this piece here. She also has beading on that piece. But for Marjolein, she says the medium is the message. The wool is alive. It's transformational. It transforms as you're working on it, and you transform as you're working with it. And in fact, she started working with felt just accidentally. She was making felt toys for her children when they were young. And she thought, oh, this is cool. And then she fell into the sheep hole, as I like to say. And she actually talked to me a lot about the physical demands of these pieces. They are incredibly either joyful for her or, they can drain her. She has a really quite deep relationship with these pieces. This is the oldest piece. It's from 2017. It's called Messulin. Messulin, which is a figure in European folklore. It's a myth of a river spirit. It's usually a woman who is a serpent or a fish from the waist down, much like a mermaid. She's also sometimes illustrated with wings or two tails or both. And her legends are especially connected with the northern and western areas of France, Luxembourg, and the Low Countries. And I did look up Messulin, and there was a tremendous amount that I couldn't absorb readily for the talk. But suffice it to say that she's interested in mythology, in bringing the wool to life She also moves her sculptures through the landscape. There's a video on the website called Move Me, featuring Gray Matter, the piece there, and she's sort of bringing it through rivers and forest floors, and it starts to take on a life of its own. So she's really working with the aliveness of the material itself, which is very beautiful. This piece, called Pink Matter, was inspired by lava flow. And that's kind of all you have to say about it. I really encourage you to come up and look at the different colors. Each one of these pieces is wet felted and sewn. And then she sews them all together. I believe she does. I think she shears the sheep herself. I feel like she grows the sheep. But it's safe to say that she dyes these pieces herself.
And she teaches as well.
She teaches, and she has her studio Bloomfelt. Many of these artists teach, which is really wonderful.
I'm always afraid this one's gonna run away.
It feels like it definitely feels like it's. We're gonna end here. I'll come around and just say a few more things about this guy. Sarah, you can stay in the frame. So this piece by Marjolein Dallinga is called Gray Matter, and it really is extraordinary. If you look at all of the individual pieces that she's wet felted to this main body, this golden thread that's coming out of the pieces, there's pink at the very bottom. The painterly aspects, I neglected to say that with Melissa's work, which is clearly, she's painting with felt, and it's so beautiful. Marjolein is doing the same thing. I mean, she's achieving almost watercolor-like effects with the detailed, beautiful subtlety with which she's wet felting. There's even blue in here. I just noticed that for the first time. And then she's beaded. This piece for her, she said, was very heavy. It was inspired by a plant called Devil's Claw that she saw in Arizona. And the meaning behind this is the longing to be touched and to touch others, which is sort of beautiful and connects to Stephanie's work as well. This idea that the concept of not being able to touch our loved ones for the last several years, very poignant as they were making these pieces, but also that wool just begs you to touch it. So there's, again, a lot of different layers that she's working with this piece. But she made this piece, and then she made that piece as sort of more of a celebration and more of a free-flowing kind of feeling. And this is the piece that's featured in Move Me, correct?
Yeah.
Her piece that's, I don't know if she's made many films of her piece.
I think that's maybe the only one. She got a special grant for that from the Canadian government, I believe. So,
Nice.
yeah, but she should make more.
She should, and I believe also some of her pieces you can wear.
Yeah.
She's done, if you go on to her site, Bloomfelt, her studio, you'll be able to see the full range of her work, which is just extraordinary. She did costuming for Cirque du Soleil. Thank you. I knew that. She told me that. That's a great thing to add. There's also this stitching in here, this butterfly stitching of all the pieces together. That's just so beautiful.
Katie, so many of these pieces we saw are like life-size or more. How long does it take some of these artists to work on these pieces? Do you have
You know, I don't really, and I often, by looking at them, you can imagine just even learning about felting and how it's a time-based medium. Like the technique is time-based, but
I think Marjolein mentioned that this was
many months. Yeah.
And I think she talked about this piece as well, the never seen, as something that was really labor intensive because she's making each of these individual kind of sucker pieces. And this one she talked about as a kind of, she went really deep within for many months.
I don't think anything is like, oh, I made a felt piece. Like, I'm gonna have some coffee, I'm gonna make a felt piece, and then I'm gonna have lunch. I think it's I encourage you to go on the museum's website. Has some great additional information about felting. We also have felting kits here, which if you wanted to try, if you haven't felted before or you wanted to try, there's some kits available. But Melissa's interview is spectacular, and she has those airplane pictures, and it's one of the, you know, it's a revelation when you look at them and then look at these. The objectness of these pieces are so beautiful too. So.
Now, do they sketch? Does she start with a sketch and then it grows as she's going forward, or does she just?
You know, I want to say yes, but I actually think she told me she just starts, and it's in her mind. It's almost the way she was making toys for her kids. And that's sort of the way that Ruth works. I don't think Ruth sketches things out. I think she's working with the medium, and it tells her where to go. I don't know if that's the case for Melissa. She may be looking at pictures, you know. She's looking at photography.
Like photographs as references, but
Yeah.
she's really discovering a lot of things along the way
Yeah.
as she figures out what the felt does with it.
And Stephanie, though, does draw. She's a draftswoman, and she draws her forms out before she makes them. The what?
Mini versions of them too.
Oh, yeah, she makes maquettes. She is very thorough. Right? That's a good word. Yeah, and she's a delight. All these artists are a delight. I will say this, I'll end on this note that, and I started here, is that this exhibition not only was an extraordinary learning curve for me, but the harmony of the artists, each artist individually is such a lovely person. There's something about the way they want to share their work it can be very intellectual, but none of the conversations started that way. It was, oh, great, come touch the work. It's quite different than, curating with painters or photographers or formal sculptors in a way. It's quite a different vibe and really lovely, like very welcome. So thank you guys so much for coming here, braving the weather. Really appreciate it.